Welcome to Trial to Triumph, hosted by Caleb Johnson, the show about leaning into life's constant testing on your way to realizing your biggest blessings.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Caleb Johnson, host of From Trial to Triumph, and today we have a very, very special man as our guest speaker today. He's done a lot in a short amount of time, so we're going to hop right into this. So, David Toupin, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Another day in paradise. Certainly can't complain.
I love it. I say that often too. So,
yeah.
Well, David, can you go ahead and give our listeners just a quick background story about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say easiest way to describe me is I'm a real estate guy. I've been investing. I'm 27 now. I started investing when I was, I think I bought my first property when I was 20 years old. So I started that journey about 7 years ago. And I bought an apartment complex back in Michigan, 12-unit apartment complex. I had no money. I didn't know how to find the money. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was good with numbers. So I put this deal together and figured the rest out, and then kept doing it over and over again. It worked, and the second one worked, the third one worked, and we just kept scaling and growing. So I've bought a little over 1,400 apartment units. About $120 million portfolio. I've bought several self-storage facilities, commercial retail buildings. I've done a little bit of everything, but probably not industrial. It's the only thing I haven't done. And so I live and breathe real estate, investment real estate, and then I started a software company 2 years ago, which is also real estate related. And that is 100% focused on commercial real estate acquisitions. So people can go in, underwrite, create financial models, look up, property, public records, all that kind of good stuff. And it's called Real Estate Lab. So started that 2 years ago. It's going really well. It's funny, my software team has grown to about 4 times the size of my real estate team in about a third of the time. So wow. It's a different animal. But it's been fun. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
Cool, man. Well, I have so many questions, and our stories are similar in the sense that we both started investing when we were 19, and it's I don't hear a lot of people talk about that they have that story. So for you, what was the reason that you started investing at that age?
Yeah, I don't know if it's similar to your story, but I really just wanted to not work for someone else. First of all, I had done a couple of internships in college. In investment banking, and as much as that was cool and there is a fast track to making good money in that business, I wanted it quicker, and I didn't want to work for anybody else, and real estate just was very attractive to me. After I'd read some books, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was pretty much instantly like, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this, so there's nothing else. So I basically turned out a bunch of job offers, begrudgingly finished college, barely, and I was full-time my junior year. I was full-time in real estate right away.
Wow.
That's all I was doing.
Wow,
so,
cool.
I don't know, is that similar to what did you go to school or?
No, yeah. So my story when I was 19, well, when I was 20, actually, that's when I started my first business. And the reason I became an entrepreneur was because of my parents, and not because they were wealthy. They both had day jobs. And so my dad's been a librarian for 30 years, and my mom's an occupational therapist for over 15, I think. And so seeing what they had, made me realize I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to work for somebody else. And so very similar to you, I wanted my own freedom and control, a little bit controlling, which can be a good or bad thing.
That's not bad. Yeah.
And so when I learned about, 90% of millionaires had gotten their millions through real estate, I thought that was crazy. And so around 19 years old is when I found that out. So that's what made me interested. And then from there, it was kind of like you with Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was like, this is what I'm doing. I have to do this.
This is the only way.
That's the only way.
I feel like for a lot of people, dude, you may feel like it's similar, but once you get that bug, the real estate bug, and it clicks, oh wow, you can make money pretty much out of nothing in this business.
Right.
Right. That's the coolest thing. So.
And why else would we do anything else? Right. I still want to be opportunistic. right? I don't want to put myself in a bubble or a box and say, hey, I only need to be real estate. I do believe it's the best investment class out there. And at the same time, there's a lot of other opportunities, through
Correct.
stocks or businesses. I just talked to someone who invests in bourbon barrels. And I guess, I don't know how that works exactly, but all I know is the barrels sit in the building.
Kentucky, there's a big business for it.
Yeah. And then they just appreciate like 16% year over year. And so anyway, I'll digress. But I'm curious for you, David, you scaled from 19 years old to 25. I think you acquired over 100 million assets under management. So how did you scale that quickly at such a young age?
Yeah, it's all kind of a blur, to be honest. I mean, I don't think there's any sort of secret sauce other than you've got to be really good at finding deals, and you've got to really understand that buying large commercial properties or multifamily properties, it's all commercial real estate, right? It's a financial business. And so every property we look at, you're buying a business. You need to evaluate the financials and the health of that business, and you got to evaluate the potential. And I got really good at that, the number side of things. And so I could look at deals really quick, underwrite them, really understand it. And then when I found a good deal, I felt super confident in actually taking it down because I knew and understood the numbers. And obviously, not throwing aside the fact that you need to set your boots on the ground and get there and be on site and all that good stuff that comes after you buy it, right? But it just kind of clicked. And so I was just spending all my time hunting down deals, looking for deals, and then we'd buy one, and then part of the time would go to asset management and construction management, but I'm already looking for the next deal before I close on the first one, right? And so so it just kind of ended up scaling pretty quick, and then I started in Michigan, started buying down in Texas, and that's when I moved to doing like larger and larger deals. And so you hit $100 million pretty quick when you're doing like $10-15 million projects. Funny enough, I've actually scaled in the opposite direction recently. I now do smaller deals. I don't do as large of deals. Yeah, because they're so easy to knock down. I really specialize now in doing like $2 to $10 million projects, and those are my favorite because I can joint venture them. Sometimes I can buy them on my own, or I could buy them with just one other partner. And so, I do a lot of joint ventures now, but I stay in that kind of, I don't want to call it small, but it's small relative to the bigger players out there buying $30, $40, $50 million projects. So,
Right.
I think having a good team too is really important. I don't self-manage, so that's always helped with, I think, scaling. I always use third-party management. I've gone through a bunch of them. I've learned the good ones and the bad ones, and once you learn how to really effectively work with third-party management companies, essentially it's a babysitting job. But not in a bad way, not to put them down, but it is, you have to, just because they're managing the property doesn't mean you also don't have, you're not supposed to be managing it either. You have to be very hands-on with them and watch over them, make sure they're doing the right things, hitting the right rents.
Right.
So all that good stuff.
Hi, my friend Caleb Johnson here, and I have a huge question to ask you real estate investors. How would you rate your personal discipline on a scale of 1 to 10? If your answer is anything less than a 10, I have something neat for you. And let me tell you, discipline means pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone and doing things that are difficult and sometimes boring. Achieving massive success requires you to do those difficult things. Now, I just released a program for investors where I walk with you as an accountability coach to help you stay on track, and I'm doing this for free. That's right, for free. But I'm only offering this to the first 5 people who sign up because I don't have availability for more than that. Starting is easy. Go to redcapitalgroup.com and click accountability coaching at the top right of the screen. So let's get to work, and now to the interview. Yeah, and that's a big mistake that I see people make, I think, and that's how a lot of assets become distressed, right? Is
Yes.
because someone, let's say, the age-old story is someone from California buys a property, let's say in the Midwest, Texas or Oklahoma, or somewhere else that cash flows, and they just have a property manager manage the day-to-day, and they don't have weekly calls or anything, and they kind of just get a check, a little bit, but there's no real management on the property manager, and that's a big mistake that I see. And I actually personally really like buying assets that are like that, from those investors that are really hands-off.
100%, dude. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I do. I do weekly calls. For some that are more stabilized, bi-weekly, and the stuff that's the most stabilized, it'll be like a monthly call, but at the very least monthly. And then I'm on site every week to, at the most, 3 months for my stabilized stuff, because even the stabilized stuff, I really want it to stay well-maintained, and I'm making sure that they're not slipping. If they know that I'm there every month, they're going to be way more on top of it than, even if I'm out of state, I like to be there often. So,
yeah, I think, you're right. Spot on.
Yeah.
Now, David, when you started investing in Michigan, I'm curious, what was the reason that you transitioned to being out of state and starting in Texas?
Yeah, I bought a deal. All right, let me think. I bought a deal south of Houston, 156 units, with a partner that was from Texas. And I came down and visited Austin, and I just fell in love with it. I love the city, the vibe, super fun, like the lakes, and it's hot here. I'm used to Michigan winters, which is freezing cold, snow. So I was like, hey, this is a great opportunity. I'm young. I've got a few assets in Michigan, but like I still come back anyways to visit family often. So it just it made sense, and I wanted to kind of get out and try something new. So moved to Austin, kept buying properties around Texas. So bought some stuff in DFW, down in Austin. I've got stuff down in South Texas and McAllen, and I love the market here. It's really expensive. Austin's wild. It's hard to find anything over a 5 cap even right now with rates where they're at. Right. But if you find the right deals, it's great on an exit strategy play. And I think the long-term hold here is a no-brainer. So,
yeah, and I'm a younger guy too, and so when you say you lived in Michigan and then you went to Austin, you fell in love with it, and you said I'm a young guy, and why not just start moving here? I love the city, and so do you recommend that for everybody? Maybe when is that good, and when shouldn't someone do that?
Yeah, well, I'll say coming from somebody who I never had aspirations or dreams to like move anywhere else. I never really thought about it. Growing up there and having everybody in my family live there, I never really imagined I'd live somewhere else until I started traveling a little bit more. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe I was about to stay in one place for my entire life. Like, I think it is important. Yeah, I think it is important to get out and try something new and see, because there's so many different markets out there, so many different places out there, experiences, cities. And if you just stay in your hometown forever, I think you are missing out, regardless of whether you go back or not eventually. I think you'd be missing out by not at least trying different experiences and checking something else out.
Now, going back to your first deal, David, it was a 12 unit. And I wish I started in commercial when I was first starting off. My first property was a 4-plex, and I lived in 1 unit, rented out the other 3. And it was great to learn. And at the same time, you said you started with that property and kind of figured it out. And a property that size, I think, is a lot more feasible to figure it out compared to 150 units, right? And so definitely, you can partner with maybe 1 or 2 people depending on the size of the asset. But for you, how did you find the capital to actually buy that first property?
Yeah, it was tough. I won't lie. As I only needed $200K for down payment and renovations, but I was going to a lot of meetups, RIAs, those type of things locally, and just through networking, honestly. Through networking and asking people like, hey, do you know anyone who's got some money who wants to put into this deal? Put a little package together, started sending it out. Got a lot of people that are like, no, like, you don't know what you're doing, like, you're too young. And then I got a couple people that were like, yeah, this seems cool. You seem like a cool dude. Like, all right, here's 20K, here's 25K.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got like 5 people to throw some money in on the deal.
Nice.
Yeah, it was definitely tough. The toughest deal I've ever raised for was my third deal, because I went from 200K raise to 1.7 million. And that still to date was the toughest thing I've ever had to do. It's just
Really?
The jump was just so big. That was the most difficult thing. I was like 5 or 6 years ago, but it was just the jump. I just didn't have the connections. Like I didn't know the people with the money, and I had a little bit of a track record. I bought 2 12 units at that point, so it's not a lot. And it was a 100-unit deal, so that was a stretch, and it took me 5 months to close that deal. I extended 3 times for 30 days just so I could raise enough money just to close. And I had to keep raising even after I closed on the deal. I still had to keep raising.
Yeah.
So thank God that seller was chill. He was cool.
Yeah. And just to give a little color in the industry, for those who aren't familiar, one extension is pretty normal. You know, you have a 15 or maybe a 30-day extension, and that's pretty normal. But some, 2 extensions, maybe 2 15-day extensions, I mean, isn't as normal. But okay,
3
I
months
could
is
see
a
that.
lot.
Yeah, 3 months is a lot. Yeah, and 3 extensions, that's a lot. So that's a great seller, man.
It might have even been longer. I don't even know. It could have been like 5.5 months.
I'm sure it felt longer.
Yeah, it felt like forever. I definitely had some gray hair by the end of that. But it worked out, and it was like I went away. I was like gone. Like none of my friends heard from me or saw from me. Like I basically threw everything aside, and that was all I was doing. And that's seriously genuinely what it takes. Is like if you're willing to say screw everything else. This is my dream. I'm going to go 100% all in on it, and nothing else right now matters, because unless I do this, I'm not going to get there. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's the difference, is what I tell people. It's like, how bad do you want this?
Yeah.
I wanted it, man. Yeah.
How bad do you want it? I love that. Now, go ahead.
I was going to ask, you still own your fourplex today, that first fourplex?
No, I owned it for probably 1.5 years, almost 2 years, and then sold it through a 1031 exchange, and then bought a retail facility as a JV. And that was in the Arizona market. Bought it around 2020, maybe 2019.
Oh, nice.
And then sold it when it really went up. I think we had well over 150K in equity. And for a 21-year-old, that was just a real blessing. In the Arizona market.
Well, you had 150K in your fourplex.
That's right.
That you sold into a retail building.
That's right.
And then you still hold the retail building, or you sold that too?
We still own that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So that's probably gone up a ton too, huh?
Well, we're still working on it. It's a redevelopment play, and so I will say this for the listener, so you can learn. But whenever I just spoke to Brian Burke, and he's an amazing investor. And he said, I think it was him, but you never want to be a day early, but you want to be a week late, right? So you don't want to be a day early, but a week late. And what that means is you don't want to be the first one into a market, because you don't know what's going to happen. It's much more safe to be a little bit late to the party than be the first one at the party for 2-3 years, 4 or 5, and maybe it never takes off, right? You think it will, and you think there might be a big equity gain to be made, but it might not all happen. So
did you buy that in like a small town, or was it? Yeah,
so I'm in Phoenix, and then about 45 minutes south is a city called Casa Grande, and population's a little over 50,000. Growing a lot. There is a ton of potential opportunity and growth there. And so there's some development, and we bought this facility in downtown Casa Grande, and there's nothing really happening there, right? There's some developments happening in the area, tons of apartments, but we're the first ones kind of in this market to revitalize it. And we got it for a great deal. Yeah, seller financed. There's probably a C neighborhood. There's still some homeless people walking around. And so, yeah, we're probably a little early on that one, and that deal is still playing out. So stay tuned for that. But
Nice.
definitely a ton of learning lessons on that one.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, I'm a big believer and a fan of downtown real estate, and not just like primary market downtowns, but go out to the suburbs and find the little walkable downtown infill areas where you've got good zoning, and there are, there's maybe a little Main Street America, man. You can't go wrong. And I'm not talking like in the middle of nowhere, but like, okay, you've got a town of 50,000 people and you got a downtown, like at some point, maybe it's a bet depending on the market, but at some point, I think the odds are good that maybe that downtown could be revitalized. Developers come in, that happens all the time. A lot of my real estate in Michigan is surrounded around 3 little downtown areas in the suburbs of Detroit. I don't invest in Detroit, so these are all in the suburbs, and they're all walkable little towns. In the center, there's buildings that go up to 5, 6, 7 stories. Right, so you've got some vertical play there, a lot of bars, restaurants, activities. Like, people love going into these areas, and those properties always stay full, always. And so, I love the suburban, out in the suburbs type of stuff too. That stuff's very vanilla and basic, and it makes money. But I love the infill downtown type of stuff.
That's cool.
That's my
favorite. I haven't heard too many people talk about that, but I think you're spot on,
Yeah.
And I hope you're right, especially with this deal, I'd love it to take off, and I think we're getting close every day. And so, yeah. But I want to talk, this is called From Trial to Triumph. And so your biggest triumph or trial, it sounded like, was that $1.7 million raise. And so how did you end up getting that done?
Again, yeah, it sounds so simple, but literally I would go to meetups, and I would go to networking events, and I would go to real estate conferences during that time. And I, every single one I could find, every week, every 4 days a week, 5 days a week. And I would literally just network my face off and talk to everybody and tell them I have a deal going on. And do you know anybody? And are you interested? I would try to get through to the friends and family, or people I know, or ask family members hey, do you know anyone that would invest? You met anyone at church who you think's got money? Stuff like that. And then I would get on the phone with them. Neighbors, literally everyone. I knocked on every door. I got 200 no's and I got 26 yeses.
Nice.
And those 26 people funded the 1.7. I again had zero money at the time. I put no money into that deal. I made a little bit of acquisition fees on my first 2 deals, but I hadn't sold them yet, so I hadn't really made money on the first 2. And so that was my first, hey, we got this deal done. And that deal ended up being one of my best deals ever. I almost doubled investors' money in 18 months. It was
Wow.
1.7x, more than 1.7x. So it was a 45 IRR or something like that. I lived in it. I house hacked it. It was a 96 unit. I house hacked it. I self-managed it. I hired and fired on-site staff. I had to clean house with the existing staff, hired some new staff, some of which are still working for me 6 years later to this day, and have moved across country to work with me, which is amazing.
Wow.
Very grateful for that. But that property was the best learning experience ever, because I managed a $500,000 renovation. Never done that before. Managed a property, a 96 unit, hired my first employees. It was I'm very grateful for that experience that I had.
Yeah.
And it made a lot of money. So
yeah, there you go, to top it off. You said so many cool nuggets there, and just to pull a couple out is that I'm a big advocate of whenever you get into something, kind of know how to do it, the basics, but at some point you just have to do it, right? You just have to take action and actually get into it. And you literally got into it. And I've never heard of anyone living on a larger apartment like that, and owning it. I've lived in a 4-plex, and they kind of know I'm the owner, but 96 units, I've never heard that before. And so I think that's an amazing story, amazing testimony. And obviously it paid off too, you got what you put into it. And so all that work paid off. So I commend you for that. That's very awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big house hack, that's for sure. But
it might be the biggest one to date.
It might be a Guinness World Record.
Yeah.
Although I think there are definitely several billionaires who build skyscrapers and make their home in the penthouse. So
Probably,
one day,
yeah.
one day that'll
Yeah.
be us.
Yep. And I think the last thing from that one was that, you went to so many networking events and, shook hands and kissed babies. I think that's,
Oh, yeah.
for me, that was so important starting off. I was really big into Bigger Pockets, which is like a free real estate network. It's like Facebook for real estate investors, and would message 5 different people a day just to get around people. And some of those relationships have turned into limited partners and JV partners. And so there's been so much that's come out of the networking. But I think starting off, if you're that 20-year-old to 25-year-old or even younger investor, network your face off, because those relationships will compound over time. And you also have to work those relationships, maybe touch base every quarter, every 6 months. So you also don't want to be the guy that just contacts people whenever they need money or they have a deal. And so definitely just stay in front of your investors.
Yeah, you can't expect to create waves in business without meeting a ton of people. And who knows, you might meet a business partner, a future business partner, you might meet an investor, you might meet a property owner. I mean, yeah, you've got to, I love what you said, shake some hands, kiss some babies. I say that all the time.
Yeah.
It's that's our second saying that we share.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's important.
Yeah. And David, what would you say has contributed most to your success, your overall success as an entrepreneur? And I know that's a pretty loaded question, so we could go a lot of different ways, but for you, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's so general, but like you have to work hard. It's such a simple, it sounds like such a simple concept, but I my first 3 years in business, I worked 100 hours a week every single week. I didn't travel, I didn't drink, I didn't party. I cut off all my friends, and I was a hermit. And I literally just worked all the time, every single day, 7 days a week. And but that led for me going from zero to $1 million net worth in like 2.5 years. And that's what a lot of people don't want to do and aren't willing to do. But the ones that you see have massive success in a short amount of time, it's like they're normally not out partying and they're not out, going crazy with their friends all the time. Like sometimes you got to put that, unfortunately, on the back burner for a little while, so that in the future you can do that whenever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that's the first thing. The second thing, which is I think equally as important, is integrity. And I think if you have certain values, and integrity should always be one of them, you should always stand by those values, no matter a dollar amount, no matter what the check could look like. I value integrity over everything, and I think it has led to insane, although maybe in the short term it hasn't led to as much money, in the long term it has led to significantly more opportunities, people that trust me and want to work with me, because they always have, will have good things to say about my ethics and the way I do business. And if you make integrity a non-negotiable, you will always have an abundance of money in business and life. I think it's super important.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. And I hear so many successful people say that integrity has to be in the top of your priority list. And that's so important. And
I will do a handshake deal on multi-million-dollar projects and that to me is like bond. And like there's a lot of people that won't do that. Now you don't take it lightly. Don't just go throwing around, multi-million-dollar handshakes left and right. But like when you do it, I think it's important. And I've just been fortunate. I have some good influence in my life that have taught me that stuff. But yeah.
And how would you say that you give back? I know some people, they give back through charity. Some people have gone as far as actually adopting people. But what for you, David, how would you say that you give back?
Yeah, I would say outside of real estate wise, I always try to help people that are new to this business get in the game and do stuff like this, come on podcasts and give back in that way, inspire. But the most recent thing I did, actually, I went to Guatemala and I built a school for some kids.
Wow.
And that was a crazy experience. We're like a 9-hour drive from Guatemala City up in the mountains, the middle of nowhere. Your cell phone doesn't work for like an entire week. And I went with a group of friends and we hammered out the foundation for a school and got to hang out with this village for a week. And it was like one of the coolest things I've ever done in my entire life. Like just getting to know the people and the kids, and it was just so authentic, and it was really, I don't know, it was the coolest thing. So we raised a bunch of money, and then we raised like $40,000-$50,000 as a group, and then we went out and did the first step to kind of build a school, and then the money we raised paid the contractors to come in and do the rest of the work after. So we didn't like start to finish in a week, but
yeah,
we did the first.
That's super cool. Did you just come up with that idea and that plan to go do it, or was that through your church or what?
No, I had a buddy who invited me on it, actually. He had done a couple. He had gone to Africa and built some water systems. They'd done a school before. We were going to go to Haiti, and then things were not great there, so we actually switched up, went to Guatemala instead. But yeah, a friend invited me.
Cool. Yeah, and I asked because I've been to Costa Rica a couple of times, Tijuana,
Cool.
Mexico. I just got back from Jordan on mission trips, and so, but you build, going to those places, especially being in America and seeing how the other side lives, and
Yes.
it's amazing. It puts your life in perspective. And so, you just realize how blessed we are to be in this amazing country. And I hear all the time, people complain about living here and everything's going to hell in a handbasket. And I still think, we do have our issues. I think every place does, but we definitely live in the greatest country on earth, and praise God for that.
Hands down, dude. Couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of things we take for granted that other people don't even get on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, I want to talk a little bit about that trip. What was one of the biggest takeaways for you? Maybe something that surprised you, and I asked that because I just got back from Jordan again, and there were no toilets and no paper towels or toilet paper. And so that was kind of something that threw me for a loop. But for you, what was one of the biggest takeaways and things that surprised you?
Well, I got attacked by a pack of stray dogs. That was fun.
Wow.
That was an interesting part of the trip. It happened, in these villages, they have just tons of stray dogs. And there's that, at night, they don't have bathrooms. So you go to this little, outhouse that's, barely covered. And the toilets don't flush. And yeah, I got swarmed. And luckily, the dad woke up, came out, and, pretty much saved me. It was crazy because we were staying in the houses with these families, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know this isn't a takeaway; it's just a wild story. So I walk out, and these dogs charge at me, and I'm like, fight or flight. What do I do?
Yeah.
I either turn around and they're going to chase me down, or I try and run at them and scare them. So I don't know. Fight or flight kicked in. I ran straight at them. I made a bunch of noise, scared them. They all scattered for a second. I start going back to the door. They turn around. They come right back after me. The dad had woken up at that point that was hosting us and came outside, and he started beating the crap out of these dogs. And then he went and they all scattered again. And he handed me the stick. He's like, next time, just throw this at them. They'll all run, and then you can go to the bathroom. Because these dogs just live on their property, but they're not friendly. They're just territorial dogs.
Wow.
So that was funny, kind of.
Yeah.
But the thing that honestly, the biggest true takeaway, you show up there and these kids have never seen like white people before, or people different from them, right? And so they thought we were celebrities. So these kids were constantly oh, give us piggyback rides and take a picture with us, and it was crazy. It was just they just were so grateful that we were bringing them backpacks, books, and building them a school. Such a simple thing that you and I don't even have to think for a second about. We have options of where we want to go to school, right? There's a school in every town in America. They didn't have one. So yeah, it's wild, dude. What we take for granted, what we have.
It absolutely is. And I'm glad that you said all those things. And, if you never went to that, you would have never had that dog experience. And that's a pretty funny story. And also, again, just I can hear the compassion and just the joy that you experience through your voice. And so to the listeners, I definitely recommend doing something like that. A business partner of mine, he does something very similar to that, David, where he'll actually take like 60 to 80 people, his network, usually like 80% are investors, some people similar to us, which is even cooler, but we'll go down to Tijuana and we'll build like 4 houses in 2 days. And
wow.
You see how the other side lives. And so I would highly recommend to anyone, if you haven't done something like that, even if you dip your toes in the water, you don't believe in God or whatever it is, just having that experience, because it will change your life regardless. So
I agree. Everybody's got to try it at least once.
Well, David, let's go ahead and head into the final 3 questions. And before we do that, I just really appreciate your time, really appreciate your transparency, your honesty. It was great to have you on the show, man. I took a lot away myself.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been good to be on. I'm excited for these last 3.
Yeah. So, David, if you can have a book recommendation for our listeners, what would that be?
Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Negotiating book. I mean, hands down, negotiating is it's everything in business. Everything you do is a negotiation. So, love that book. Can't recommend it highly enough.
Yep, that's a killer one. And I've read it twice. Highly recommended. So,
everyone says that's read it. I think I've read it at least two or 3 times. Everyone that's read it is man, I read that book at least twice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if people want to learn more about you, maybe work with you and learn what you're doing now, where's the best place for them to do that at?
Yeah, you check out my software company, realestatelab.com, or if you're interested in investing on the real estate side, it's toupinholdings.com, or Instagram at realestatejedi.
Nice. I like that, Real Estate Jedi. Yeah. And David, if you can share one final thing with our listeners so they can take away from today's show, what would that be?
Buy real estate. I mean, whatever business you happen to be in, I think everybody needs to own some investment property. Your house does not count. Do not count your house as an investment. I would say everybody needs to buy some sort of real estate. The best type of real estate is multifamily residential real estate. If you want to go small, at least 2 units, straight from the single family rentals if you can. Maybe buy 2 to 4 unit property, but at least get some kind of real estate. That's the biggest advice I could give to people that are not in the real estate industry.
Yep, I'd agree. Absolutely. Well, David, thank you again for being here. And to everyone tuning in, we appreciate you tuning in. Have a good day.
It's time to grab your victory. Find us on the web at redseacapitalgroup.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Red Sea Capital Group.